Daily Words of God. To grasp the purpose of God's work, the effect His work achieves in man, and what exactly is His will for man. This is what every person who follows God should attain to. Nowadays, knowledge of God's work is just what all people are lacking. The deeds that God has worked upon people, the entirety of the work of God, and what exactly is God's will for man, from the creation of the world to the present time. These are things that man neither knows nor comprehends. Not only is this inadequacy seen throughout the religious world, but also in all those who believe in God. When the day comes that you truly behold God, when you really appreciate His wisdom, when you behold all the deeds that God has worked, when you recognize what God is and has, when you have seen His bounty, wisdom, wonder, and all that He has worked upon people, it is then you will have achieved success in your faith in God. When God is said to be all-encompassing and all-bountiful, in what way exactly is He all-encompassing, and in what way is He all-bountiful? If you do not understand this, then you cannot be deemed to believe in God. Why do I say that those in the religious world are not believers in God, but are evildoers, of the same ilk as the devil? When I say they are evildoers, it is because they do not understand the will of God and are unable to see His wisdom. God at no time reveals His work to them. They are blind. They cannot see the deeds of God. They have been forsaken by God, and they completely lack the care and protection of God, not to mention the work of the Holy Spirit. Those without the work of God are all evildoers and opponents of God. The opponents of God of which I speak refer to those who do not know God, those who acknowledge God with their lips and yet do not know Him, those who follow God and yet do not obey Him, and those who revel in the grace of God and yet are unable to stand witness to Him. Without an understanding of the purpose of God's work, or an understanding of the work that God does in man, he cannot be in accord with the will of God, nor can he stand witness to God. The reason why man opposes God stems, on the one hand, from his corrupt disposition, and on the other hand, from ignorance of God and lack of understanding of the principles by which God works, and of His will for man. These two aspects, taken together, constitute a history of man's resistance to God. Novices in the faith oppose God because such opposition lies within their nature, while the opposition to God of those with many years in the faith results from their ignorance of Him, in addition to their corrupt disposition. In the time before God became flesh, the measure of whether a man opposed God was based on whether he kept the decrees set forth by God in heaven. For instance, in the age of law, whoever did not keep the laws of Jehovah was regarded as one who opposed God. Whoever stole the offerings to Jehovah, or whoever stood against those favored by Jehovah, was regarded as one who opposed God and would be stoned to death. Whoever did not respect his father and mother, and whoever struck or cursed another was regarded as one who did not keep the laws. And all who did not keep the laws of Jehovah were regarded as standing against him. This was no longer so in the age of grace, when whoever stood against Jesus was regarded as one who stood against God. And whoever did not obey the words uttered by Jesus was regarded as one who stood against God. At this time, the way in which opposition to God was defined became both more accurate and more practical. In the time when God had not yet become flesh, the measure of whether man opposed God was based on whether man worshiped and looked up to the invisible God in heaven. The way in which opposition to God was defined at that time was not all that practical, for man could not see God, nor did he know what the image of God was like, or how he worked and spoke. Man had no notions about God whatsoever, and he believed in God vaguely, because God had not yet appeared to man. Therefore, no matter how man believed in God in his imagination, God did not condemn man or make too many demands of him, because man was completely unable to see God. When God becomes flesh and comes to work among men, all behold him and hear his words, and all see the deeds that God works from within his body of flesh. At that moment, all man's notions become foam. As for those who have seen God appearing in the flesh, they shall not be condemned if they willingly obey him, whereas those who purposefully stand against him shall be deemed an opponent of God. Such people are antichrists, enemies who willfully stand against God. Those who harbor notions regarding God, but are still ready and willing to obey him, will not be condemned. God condemns man on the basis of man's intentions and actions, never for his thoughts and ideas. If he were to condemn man on the basis of his thoughts and ideas, then not a single person would be able to escape from the wrathful hands of God. Those who willfully stand against the incarnate God shall be punished for their disobedience. With regard to these people that willfully stand against God, their opposition stems from the fact that they harbor notions about God, which leads them in turn into actions that disrupt God's work. These people intentionally resist and destroy the work of God. They do not merely have notions about God, but they also engage in activities that disrupt his work. And for this reason, people of this kind shall be condemned. Those who do not willfully disrupt God's work shall not be condemned as sinners, because they are able to willingly obey and not engage in activities that cause disruption and disturbance. People like this shall not be condemned. However, when people have experienced God's work for many years, if they continue to harbor notions about God and remain unable to know the work of the incarnate God, and if, no matter how many years they have experienced his work, they continue to be filled with notions about God and are still unable to come to know him, then, even if they do not engage in disruptive activities, their hearts are nevertheless filled with many notions about God. And even if these notions do not become apparent, people like this are of no help whatsoever to the work of God. They are unable to spread the gospel for God or stand witness to Him. People like this are good-for-nothings and imbeciles. Because they do not know God and are moreover wholly incapable of casting away their notions about Him, they are therefore condemned. It can be said like this: it is normal for novices in the faith to hold notions about God or to know nothing of Him. But for one who has believed in God for many years and experienced a good deal of His work, it would not be normal for such a person to continue to hold notions. And it would be even less normal for someone like this to have no knowledge of God. It is because this is not a normal state that they are condemned. These abnormal people are all garbage. They are the ones who oppose God the most, and who have enjoyed the grace of God for nothing. All such people shall be eliminated in the end.